Hello everyone, I wanted to do a quick verbal disclaimer here to let y'all know that this video is going to cover some more heavy or disturbing topics compared to my usual videos, and this is because I'm going to be discussing my own artwork and OCs, which generally embody darker themes and concepts. So if you're a kid or sensitive to any of the warnings I have up on screen, then I advise you to click off and not engage with this one. Anyways, let's get on with the video. What's up witches, my name is Syzygy and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, then hi, hello, nice to have you. Today I will be telling you all about my next OC in the third installment of my series POV I Hold You Hostage and Force You to Listen to Me Talk About My OCs. Still a great series name, I know. As y'all voted for a while back, I will now be telling everyone all about my boy, Arthur Flynn Noir. Now, before we get into the meat of this video, I actually have a few quick announcements to make. First, I have finally started up the Ask blog for Arthur. You can find the link to the blog in the description, or at the URL askthearthurnoir.tumblr.com. Just like my Vince Ask blog, I'll be answering questions as Arthur and essentially LARPing as him, LMAO. So if you're interested in learning more about him after this video and just seeing some antics, you can go there and ask him a question. For those of you interested, I will be starting up Felix's Ask blog next, currently working on all the art for that, so stay tuned. Next up in the line of important announcements, I recently put out 3 adopts. I'm trying out adopts instead of commissions because I hate doing commissions. These 2 of the 3 are still available for purchase at $45 and $40 respectively. Not only do you get the design, but you can also use the art that I drew of them. So if you're interested, follow the link in the description or DM me on Twitter or Instagram for more details. The final announcement is that I finally chose a name for the world that all of my OCs are from. I previously called it Unnamed World because it was unnamed, but it's now called Phantasmagoria. I suppose it could also be called Fangoria for short if Phantasmagoria is a little annoying to type or to say. With all of that being said, let's jump right into talking about the universe. For those of you uninitiated, I created the Phantasmagoria universe in November of last year, and since then have added many stories and characters to the universe to round it out. If you haven't seen any of my other OC rundown videos and you know me more from my sanitized YouTube persona rather than from my artwork, then you might not be aware that I am primarily a yummy kawaii horror artist, and my work contains dark themes that may be triggering to some people or just not suitable for younger audiences. Hence the warning at the beginning of this video. I've been obsessed with horror and darker themes for pretty much ever since I can remember, and I adore the juxtaposition and contrast between cutesy lolita shit and darker themes. As I have mentioned before, Fangoria is a universe that I essentially created to vent and express myself and my love of darker themes and characters, all by either creating characters who are terrible, horrible people, or characters that are victims of terrible, horrible people, you know, just nice stuff. Very wholesome. I'm being sarcastic. Just from how I've spoken about him before, you can probably guess that Arthur Noir, the subject of today's video, is of the former category. Before I get into that, though, I'm going to be starting with the backstory of his creation. Arthur was actually created after Felix and Charlie were. Upon writing Felix's bio, I had just randomly decided to give him a couple of siblings, one of which was much older and had a more strained relationship with Felix and his sister. I originally didn't plan to do much with Felix's siblings at all, but as I thought about it, I figured that it'd be pretty fun to round them out and, you know, make the Noir family more of a thing and develop the members of it. And this is when the idea for Arthur was born. From basically the very beginning, I wanted him to be a snobby rich asshole, a slimy CEO of a decently sized successful company. As I mentioned before, I also wanted him to have a rather unstable relationship with both of his siblings and his stepfather, so I figured that him being the successful git of the family who doesn't really respect anyone worked pretty well as a way to do that. His creation was actually relatively smooth, and there weren't many changes to him as a character throughout the developments, rather just add-ons. There were no major design or vision changes from the initial concept to his current day version. So allow me to talk about the specifics of how he came to be, backstory-wise. So Arthur was born in London to his mother, whose name is Alana. I don't actually have a full picture of her yet, but I should soon, so stay tuned for an eventual Toyhouse profile for her. She was 15 when she had him, unfortunately. 14 when she got pregnant and was in a pretty ugly and toxic relationship with Arthur's father for a long time. Arthur's bio-father was about 22 when they met, and when she turned 18, they married. They were together for about 11 years, which were filled with a lot of turmoil for both Arthur and Alanna. Arthur was never actually, hurt by his father, but he had to see some pretty ugly arguments and physical disputes break out between his parents. Shortly after Arthur turned 10, though, Alanna took him and fled the UK, emigrating to the US to escape her now ex-husband. They moved to Boise, Idaho, where Alanna eventually met Eric Noir, who is Charlie and Felix's biological father. After a couple of years, Alanna and Eric were wed, and when Arthur was around 14, his twin siblings were born. He left home basically the moment that he turned 18, pretty much, and therefore never really got to know his siblings as much as he could have. He moved to California in pursuit of becoming an entrepreneur, and about 6 years later, he had a master's in business. A few years down the line, and he founded Noir Incorporated, which is a technology manufacturer that produces things like phones, computers, cables, all of that stuff. Since Noir Inc.'s founding, he has actually done incredibly well financially and is in the Millionaires Club and has settled down in Silicon Valley, California permanently. He still flies out to Boise on holidays though to visit his parents. So yeah, that's pretty much the bulk of his whole backstory. So now let's get into more specifics about his personality. Arthur is my beloved. He's absolutely awful, but in a way that I adore. Obviously not endorsing any of his actions and antics, I just think that they're funny and they're over-exaggerated for the sake of surrealist and absurdist comedy. Crazy that I have to specify that, but here we are. Though the man has never been formally diagnosed in his life, as he's never been to therapy, he does have pretty much a lot of symptoms of both narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder, or NPD and ASPD, and is a clinical narcissist to the nth degree. Due to his social status and success, all of the publicity and positive press and money just gets to his head and makes his huge ego all the worse. He's insanely self-absorbed to an absurd degree. Again, over-exaggerated for comedy, not really reflective of real life. And he has no qualms in running over people both figuratively and maybe even literally to get what he wants. Because he's in the public eye, he does that really gross business thing where he'll act super woke, especially socially and environmentally conscious, but doesn't really care about either of those causes. He mostly just says PC things so that the media turns a bit of a blind eye to his questionable expenditures and business practices. Furthermore, he will often also smile excessively and act like he's working customer service when talking to anyone in public because God forbid someone pulls out their phone and records him being problematic or something and he gets cancelled on Twitter. He also does super cringe fail millionaire shit, like flying in private jets to travel 30 minutes, causing carbon emissions the magnitude of an entire country, Taylor Swift style. He definitely lives in a ridiculously expensive penthouse in Silicon Valley, specifically in Sunnyvale, though the Noir Inc. location is in San Jose. Now let's get to the part of the video where I talk about his species, because people have asked me about that in the past. So I think that I mentioned it in my last video, the one where I talk about Ophelia, that the cast of Phantasmagoria is made up of both humans and then humanoid monsters, or just monsters, I suppose. For example, from the characters I've already discussed in previous videos, Vince is an arachnid/human hybrid who has many spider-like features such as fangs, venom, multiple limbs, and multiple eyes, and Ophelia is a shifter that can change her form. Arthur specifically, though, is a voodoo doll. I explained it a little in a stream, but when we're unscripted, we can't talk for shit, so just let me cover it in a bit more detail here. So the voodoo doll species is a subspecies of doll, like monsters, they're just doll people, that when injured or pleasured are able to share with another person of their choosing. They can either choose to fully bear the wound or the pleasure that they experience, or if they have some DNA of their target, or if they are physically touching them, they can share their physical feelings with them. If they choose to share their wounds specifically, say for example, Arthur were to share a stab wound with someone, he would not retain the actual injury and the wound would heal up, but he would fully experience the pain for himself. Similarly, he could shoot himself in the head to kill someone else if he had their DNA, and he would survive, but he would experience the pain from that action as well. Besides just that ability, though, his species also leads to lacks of certain physical features like nipples or a belly button, and his skin is oddly soft and sort of plush-like. He also has physical features that differ from that of a human as well, such as the stitch heart on the left side of his chest, the stitches all over his body, and finally his button-like pupils. Both of his parents, Alana and his biological father, were voodoo dolls as well, so he's pure-blooded in that sense. His half-siblings though, Felix and Charlie, don't have very many voodoo doll-like features themselves, at least physically, because their father, Eric, is a ball-jointed doll, but they do possess the same abilities that Arthur and Alana do. I'll talk about them more specifically though in their own video. Don't bully me too bad for my bad explanations and ideas. Stepping away from species now, let's discuss his interpersonal relationships with the rest of the cast, which is my favorite part, whoop whoop. So starting with his family, he has a pretty strained relationship with pretty much everyone there but his mother. He's a real mama's boy. Despite his success and financial stability, Arthur doesn't really tend to share it with his family without a price. He's the type that gives you gifts, fully expecting something in return. He might loan Felix money, for example, and then we'll come to him acting like Felix owes him something specifically because he lent him the money. Both Eric and Felix are relatively passive and shy people who have difficulty saying no to him, but Charlotte, Felix's twin sister, has no qualms about telling Arthur to take his hollow gifts and empty promises and to shove them up his ass. She sees right through his plastic-ass smiles, and because she's very blunt about disliking him and not trusting him, she and Arthur have the rockiest relationship out of the ones with his family. Alana, though, is pretty blinded with love for all of her kids, and often thinks that Felix, Eric, and especially Charlie being wary of Arthur is completely unfounded. She pampers her little baby out the wazoo and coddles him, even though he's literally 35. He's basically her little angel, and it's frustrating to the rest of the family who have an idea of how conniving and dickish he is. She doesn't mean to feed into the narcissism, she just does because she loves him. It's kind of toxic. So now let's move on to his relationship with Vince. Arthur and Vince could technically be considered boyfriends, or well, at least Vince considers Arthur to be his boyfriend, whereas Arthur just kind of views him as a ditzy side hoe. In the OC rundown on Vince, I actually talked a little bit about how the two of them met, and refresher, they met because Arthur caught Vince selling off-brand Noir phones and threatened to get legal involved if Vince didn't do him a favor. I actually wrote an unhinged fic about their first meeting like months ago and I posted it recently. It's on Toyhouse under literatures, but note, it's explicitly 18+. Yeah, don't go looking for it if you're a kid. Anyways, back on topic, forget I said anything. His and Vince's relationship actually kind of starts out as really one-sided, with Vince insisting that they're basically in love and going to get married, with Arthur repeatedly denying that something like that could ever happen. But even though Arthur will contend repeatedly that he doesn't feel much about him at all, they do actually have a lot of chemistry, and Arthur goes out of his way to see him quite often, especially because they live like an hour apart. I hesitate to call it love exactly, because it's really not. Both of them just become possessive over each other in a concerning, unhealthy way. Arthur starts to like him a little bit more initially because he can just kind of drop the good guy, innocent, very, PC CEO routine and be himself around him, and vice versa. Vince feels the same way about him. They're just two terrible people being terrible together, for realsies. But even though Arthur feels some type of way about him, that doesn't mean he won't lie to everyone else and to himself and insist that he doesn't. Men. Outside of just Vince, he also knows Freddie and Ratboy, who Vince introduced him to as his boyfriend. Freddie has a sort of adversarial relationship with him. She trusts him absolutely not at all, and thinks someone like him being involved with Vince in the first place is sus as all hell. Arthur feels pretty much the same way about her, adversarial, but a bit more apathetic and distant about it than she is. He feels quite similarly about Ratboy, but is a bit more put off by him. Ratboy is just the weird masky guy that he knows little about and doesn't care to get to know. Ratboy himself doesn't have very many feelings about Arthur, but also thinks he's a little bit sus. He's not suspicious of him specifically because of Vince's and his relationship like Freddie is, but is more so wary of him just because Arthur could get him into legal trouble. He overall cares very little though, and just thinks it's kind of funny to sit back and watch Vince, Arthur, and Freddie argue. Man just gets the popcorn and watches the Spanish soap opera-esque drama play out in front of him, no fucks given. Finally, in his relationships, he thinks that Felix's boyfriend, Waylon Breyer, is just really annoying. He looks down on him because he's a poor orphan who lives with Felix in their apartment and just works Walmart backstock. Archie does that toxic friend thing where he makes really rude and condescending comments and jabs at him, and Waylon just doesn't even care. He just kind of thinks it's funny and pathetic. And that, my friends, is the Arthur Noir rundown. If you want to read more information about him, such as trivia, more specifics about his backstory, as well as if you want to see more art about him, check out his Toyhouse profile, which is linked below. You should definitely read it, he's like one of my favorites of my characters. I hope that learning some about his personality, role in the story, creation, backstory, and interpersonal relationships was interesting for everyone. Again, he's just so comically terrible, and so I just love to write about him and think up scenarios with him and the rest of the cast. As usual, please let me know if you're actually enjoying this OC sharing series and if you'd like to see more in the comments, because I have a lot of fun making it, and I just hope other people like this video series. With all of that being said, if you enjoyed this video, please rate and subscribe if you feel so inclined. You can follow the link to my card in the description if you are interested in following me on other platforms and seeing some of my artwork, both safe for work and if you're over 18, not safe for work as well. Thank you all for watching, I hope you have a nice rest of your day, and don't forget, stay magical.